The biting winter wind cut through Josephine Wilcox's threadbare shawl as she approached the weathered cabin nestled against the backdrop of Colorado's towering mountains, her trembling arms cradling a small bundle that whimpered softly in the February chill of 1876. The journey from Denver had been arduous, especially with a 3-month-old infant and the crushing weight of shame following her like a vengeful shadow. Tears streamed down her face, freezing against her pale cheeks as she carefully placed the swaddled baby on the porch of the only man rumored to be kind enough in these parts to take in an abandoned child. Josephine had heard the stories about Elijah Moore, a solitary rancher who, despite his rough exterior, had taken in orphaned calves and even a young boy whose parents had died of fever last season. The townsfolk spoke of his quiet generosity, how he never turned away someone truly in need. That was why she'd chosen his doorstep after fleeing from the scandal that threatened to destroy both her and her daughter's future. She pressed a final kiss to her baby's forehead, tucking a hastily written note explaining her desperate circumstances beneath the blanket. "I'll come back for you when I can, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise." Just as Josephine placed the bundle on the wooden planks and turned to disappear into the night, the door swung open with unexpected force. Elijah Moore stood in the doorway, his imposing 6-foot frame silhouetted by the golden lamplight behind him. His face, partially obscured by a neatly trimmed beard, registered first confusion, then understanding as his gaze moved from Josephine to the squirming bundle at his feet. "Both stay," he said firmly, his deep voice carrying no room for argument as he bent to scoop up the child with surprising gentleness. His weathered hand caught Josephine's wrist before she could flee, his grip firm but not painful. "I said both stay, madam. No child and mother should be separated on a night like this." Josephine's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "You don't understand," she protested weakly. "I can't." "You can explain inside," Elijah interrupted, his eyes softening as the baby's cries grew louder. "But first, let's get this little one out of the cold." Too exhausted to resist, Josephine allowed herself to be guided into the warmth of the cabin. The interior was surprisingly tidy, a far cry from the bachelor's quarters she had expected. A fire crackled cheerfully in the stone hearth, and the aroma of beef stew simmering on the cast-iron stove filled the modest space. "Take a seat," Elijah directed, nodding toward a rocking chair near the fire while still cradling her daughter with unexpected expertise. "What's her name?" "Emma," Josephine replied softly, sinking into the chair as the warmth of the room began to penetrate her frozen limbs. "Her name is Emma. Beautiful name for a beautiful child," he murmured, rocking the infant with a natural ease that surprised Josephine. "Now, why don't you tell me why you were leaving this precious girl on my doorstep on the coldest night of the year?" Josephine's hands trembled in her lap as she considered lying, but something in Elijah's steady gaze told her that dishonesty would not serve her here. "I worked as a governess for a wealthy family in Denver," she began haltingly. "The master of the house. He took advantage of my position." She swallowed hard, unable to meet his eyes. "When I could no longer hide my condition, I was dismissed without references. His wife called me terrible things, threatened to have me arrested if I ever spoke of it." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I've been working at a laundry these past months, but the owner discovered Emma yesterday. She said no decent establishment would employ an unwed mother." Josephine's voice cracked. "I have no money, no prospects. I thought if Emma had a chance at a proper home." "And you thought abandoning her was the answer?" Elijah's voice held no judgment, only a gentle inquiry. "I wasn't abandoning her," Josephine protested, tears springing fresh to her eyes. "The note explained everything. I was going to find work in one of the mining towns, save enough to come back for her. I've heard you're a good man, Mr. Moore. I thought, I hoped that I would raise your child while you disappeared into the night? He shook his head, but his expression remained kind. What kind of man would I be if I separated a child from her mother? A practical one, Josephine answered, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. No one will hire me with a baby. Without work, we'll both starve. Elijah considered her words as he gently rocked Emma, who had quieted in his arms. I need help around this place, he said after a moment. Spring calving season is coming, and I could use an extra pair of hands for cooking and keeping house while I tend the cattle. His eyes met hers directly. You and Emma can stay in the back room. It's small, but it's private. In exchange for your work, you'll have food, shelter, and a small wage. Josephine stared at him in disbelief. You would do that for strangers? I'm offering you honest work, Mississippi. Wilcox. Josephine Wilcox. Miss Wilcox. It's a business arrangement, nothing more. You need a safe place for you and your daughter. I need help with the domestic side of ranching. He offered a slight smile. My biscuits could break a man's tooth. Despite herself, Josephine felt a small smile tug at her lips. I make excellent biscuits, Mr. Moore. Elijah, he corrected. If we're to live under the same roof, we might as well use our given names. Josephine nodded, her mind racing as she considered his offer. It seemed too good to be true: shelter, food, and the chance to keep her daughter. But what choice did she have? The alternative was unthinkable. I accept, she said finally, but I want to be clear about my position. I won't be. I can't. Understanding dawned in Elijah's eyes. I'm offering employment, Josephine, not anything improper. You have my word as a gentleman that you and Emma will be safe here. For the first time in months, Josephine felt something like hope flutter in her chest. Thank you. Elijah nodded, then glanced down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in his arms. She has your eyes, he observed quietly. Her father's actually, Josephine admitted, her voice barely audible. No, Elijah said firmly. She has your eyes clear and honest. Now let me show you to your room. You both need rest. The back room was indeed small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small cradle that looked handcrafted. Josephine ran her fingers over the smooth wood, puzzled. My sister's boy used it when they visited last summer, Elijah explained, noticing her confusion. I'll bring in some fresh linens for both of you. After Elijah left to fetch the bedding, Josephine sank onto the edge of the mattress, cradling Emma close. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps there was a future for them after all. As the days turned into weeks, Josephine settled into life at the Moore Ranch. True to his word, Elijah was a respectful employer, keeping a proper distance while treating both her and Emma with unfailing kindness. Each morning, she rose before dawn to prepare breakfast before Elijah headed out to work the cattle. She spent her days cleaning the cabin, tending a small kitchen garden she had started, and caring for Emma, who thrived in the peaceful environment. In the evenings, after Emma was asleep, Josephine and Elijah would often sit by the fire, sharing the quiet companionship of two solitary souls who had somehow found comfort in each other's presence. Elijah spoke little of his past, but through careful questions, Josephine learned that he had come west after the war between the states, seeking a fresh start after losing his family's Virginia farm. Land was cheap here, he explained one evening as they sat shelling peas from the garden. No one wanted to ranch in territory still contested by the Ute. But I found this valley, made peace with the local tribe, and started building. Weren't you afraid, coming all this way alone? Josephine asked, genuinely curious about the quiet strength that seemed to define him. Elijah's hands stilled momentarily. After Gettysburg, not much seems frightening anymore. Something in his tone told Josephine not to press further, and she respected the boundaries he set around certain aspects of his past, just as he never questioned her about Emma's father beyond what she had initially shared. As spring blossomed into summer, Josephine found herself watching Elijah when he didn't notice the gentle way he would hold Emma while Josephine prepared dinner, the quiet competence with which he handled even the most fractious cattle, the rare but transformative smile that would occasionally break through his serious demeanor. She told herself it was merely gratitude she felt, nothing more. Emma's first birthday approached with the turning leaves of autumn. Josephine had saved a small portion of her wages each month, tucking the coins into a tin box hidden beneath her mattress. She had enough now to perhaps rent a small room in town, find work at the hotel or mercantile. The thought should have brought relief. Independence had been her goal all along, but instead, it filled her with an unexpected sadness. The morning of Emma's birthday, Josephine woke to find Elijah already gone from the cabin, though he had left a small wooden horse on the table with a note. For Emma, happy birthday. The toy was exquisitely carved, each detail rendered with painstaking care. Josephine ran her fingers over the smooth surface, recognizing the hours of work such craftsmanship would have required. When Elijah returned that evening, Josephine had prepared a special dinner and a small cake sweetened with honey from the hives he kept on the eastern edge of the property. "You didn't have to go to such trouble," he said, looking genuinely touched by the celebration. "It's not every day a child turns one," Josephine replied, watching as Emma gleefully smashed cake between her chubby fingers. "Besides, I wanted to thank you properly for the horse. It's beautiful, Elijah." He ducked his head, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "It's nothing, just something to remember us by when you decide it's time to move on." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. "I've been thinking about that," Josephine said carefully. "About our arrangement." Elijah's expression closed immediately, his eyes shuddering. "I understand. You've saved enough to start fresh elsewhere. That was always the plan." "No," Josephine said quickly. "That's not what I meant. I was wondering if you might consider extending our arrangement. Emma is thriving here, and She faltered, uncertain how to express the confusing tangle of feelings that had grown in her heart over the past months. Hope flickered briefly in Elijah's eyes before he carefully masked it. "You and Emma are welcome to stay as long as you wish. The work you do here is valuable." "Just the work?" Josephine asked softly, gathering her courage. Elijah set down his fork, his gaze meeting hers directly. "What are you asking me, Josephine?" "I'm asking if you might consider a more permanent arrangement," she said, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "For Emma's sake, of course." "For Emma's sake," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "And what exactly would this arrangement entail?" Josephine felt her cheeks burn. "I know it's unconventional, you taking in a woman with another man's child. People would talk." "I've never much cared what people say," Elijah replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I need to be clear about what you're proposing." Before Josephine could respond, Emma let out a delighted squeal, reaching toward Elijah with sticky hands. Without hesitation, he lifted her onto his lap, unconcerned about the cake smearing onto his clean shirt. "Papa," Emma said clearly, patting his cheek with a frosting-covered hand. Josephine gasped. It was Emma's first real word beyond baby babble. Elijah looked equally stunned, his expression a complex mixture of surprise, tenderness, and something deeper that made Josephine's heart skip. "She's never said that before," Josephine whispered. "I don't know where she learned it." "Children see more than we realize," Elijah said quietly, gently wiping Emma's hands with a napkin. He looked up at Josephine, a new resolve in his eyes. I don't want to be just her employer, Josephine. Or yours. What do you want to be? She asked, barely breathing. Her father. Your husband. If you'll have me. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, transforming the humble cabin with its weight and possibility. You don't have to marry me out of obligation, Josephine said, needing to be certain. We can continue as we are if that's what you prefer. Obligation. Elijah shook his head, a rare smile softening his features. Josephine Wilcox, do you truly not know that I've been falling in love with you since that winter night when you stood on my porch? Joy, bright and unexpected, bloomed in Josephine's chest. You never said anything. You needed safety, not complications. I wanted to give you time, space to heal. He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. But if you're ready now, there's nothing I want more than to make you and Emma my family in truth, not just in practice. Tears blurred Josephine's vision as she turned her hand to clasp his. I think I've loved you since you said both stay, she admitted. I just didn't believe I deserved happiness after everything that happened. The past is the past, Elijah said firmly. What matters is the future we build together. Emma, sensing the emotional shift in the room, patted both their joined hands, leaving a sticky imprint that made them both laugh through their tears. Is that a yes? Elijah asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Yes, Josephine whispered. Yes to everything. The town of Pine Ridge buzzed with speculation when Elijah Moore rode in with Josephine and Emma to speak with the circuit preacher the following Sunday. The whispers intensified when they emerged from the small church an hour later as husband and wife. Emma perched happily on Elijah's hip as if she had always belonged there. Mrs. Prescott, the mercantile owner's wife and self-appointed moral guardian of the community, made a point of confronting them outside the general store as they purchased supplies. Well, Mr. Moore, she said with barely disguised disapproval, I see you've taken in more than just strays this time. Elijah's arm tightened protectively around Josephine's waist. I've married the finest woman in the territory, Mrs. Prescott. My good fortune puts the rest of Pine Ridge to shame. The older woman's mouth thinned to a disapproving line. Some might question the wisdom of taking on another man's indiscretion. Before Elijah could respond, Josephine stepped forward, her chin lifted proudly. My daughter is not an indiscretion, Mrs. Prescott. She is a blessing, and my husband sees her for the treasure she is, which speaks to his character far more than your comments speak to yours. Mrs. Prescott gasped at the direct challenge, but Josephine had already turned away, taking Emma from Elijah's arms. We should get home before the weather turns, she said calmly. Emma needs her nap. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Elijah leaned close to Josephine's ear. You are magnificent when you're angry, he murmured, pride evident in his voice. I'm not angry, she replied, settling Emma on her lap as Elijah helped her onto the wagon seat. I just refuse to be ashamed anymore. Not of Emma, and certainly not of loving you. The ride back to the ranch was peaceful, Emma sleeping against Josephine's chest, while Elijah guided the horses along the familiar trail. The mountains rose majestically around them, painted in the rich golds and reds of autumn, and Josephine felt a profound sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. I have something to show you when we get home, Elijah said, breaking the comfortable silence. A surprise I've been working on. Curiosity piqued, Josephine raised an eyebrow. Another carving? Something a bit larger, he replied mysteriously, a rare mischievous glint in his eyes. When they crested the final rise that overlooked their valley, Josephine gasped. Attached to the main cabin was a new structure, the framework of an addition nearly twice the size of the original building. Elijah, she breathed as he brought the wagon to a halt before their home. What have you done? I started it after Emma's first word, he admitted, helping her down from the wagon. A proper home needs proper space. There will be 3 bedrooms when it's finished, one for us, one for Emma, and one. He hesitated, a faint color touching his cheeks. For whoever might come along in the future. The implication made Josephine's heart race. You want more children? I want whatever makes you happy, he said honestly. But yes, I'd like a large family. This land needs children's laughter to make it truly complete. Emotion swelled in Josephine's throat as she looked at the half-built addition. When did you find time to do all this? Early mornings, late evenings. Jenkins and his boys from town helped with the heavy lifting last week when you visited the doctor. He looked at her uncertainly. Do you like it? In answer, Josephine stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his, pouring all her love and gratitude into the kiss. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Emma giggled and clapped her hands from her perch in the wagon. I'll take that as approval, Elijah murmured, his eyes warm with promise. Winter came early that year, blanketing the valley in pristine white before the addition was fully completed. Elijah worked tirelessly to finish the roof and exterior walls before the worst of the snow, and by Christmas, they were able to move their belongings into the expanded home. Their first Christmas as a family was simple but perfect, a small pine tree decorated with paper stars Josephine had cut, strings of dried berries, and the few glass ornaments Elijah had carefully transported from Virginia years ago. Emma was enchanted by the colorful baubles and the small collection of presents tucked beneath the fragrant branches. On Christmas Eve, after Emma had been tucked into her new bedroom with dreams of sugar plums, Elijah presented Josephine with a small package wrapped in brown paper. It isn't much, he said apologetically. But it belonged to my mother, and I'd like you to have it. Josephine unwrapped the gift carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of Elijah on one side, and on the other a perfect miniature of Emma, painted with remarkable skill. How did you? She asked, overcome with emotion. Mrs. Jenkins' brother is an artist in Denver. I sent him a charcoal sketch I did of Emma, and he created the miniature. Elijah looked slightly embarrassed. I wanted you to have something to keep us close to your heart. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Josephine whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. I'll treasure it always. She reached beneath the tree for the package she had hidden there earlier. My gift seems inadequate in comparison, she said, suddenly shy as she handed it to him. Elijah unwrapped the bundle to find a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool, along with a folded piece of paper. His brow furrowed in confusion as he opened the note and read the single line written there in Josephine's neat handwriting. His head snapped up, eyes wide with disbelief and dawning joy. Are you certain? Josephine nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still flat stomach. Dr. Phillips confirmed it last week. The baby should arrive in early summer. With a sound that was half laugh, half sob, Elijah gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby, she echoed, feeling complete in a way she had never thought possible. Emma will be a wonderful big sister. And you, he said, pulling back to look into her eyes, are a wonderful mother and wife. I thank God every day that you came to my door that night. Even though I was trying to leave Emma behind? Josephine asked, the old guilt surfacing briefly. You were trying to give her her best chance, Elijah corrected gently. But fate had other plans for both of you, for all of us. As they sat together before the fire, planning for the future that stretched bright and promising before them, Josephine reflected on the desperate woman she had been that frigid February night, believing she had no choice but to abandon her child. How different everything had become with two simple words. Both stay. The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising to the Moore family. The summer after their wedding brought not only their son, Edward, but also unprecedented prosperity as Elijah's carefully bred shorthorn cattle fetched top prices at the Denver market. 2 years later, twins Jane and James joined their growing brood, filling the expanded cabin with laughter and the sweet chaos of childhood. Emma, now 7 years old, blossomed into a bright, compassionate girl who adored her younger siblings and shadowed Elijah whenever he allowed it, learning the ways of the ranch with natural aptitude. Though she knew the truth of her birth, Josephine had been careful to answer her questions honestly when they arose. She regarded Elijah as her father in every way that mattered. The town of Pine Ridge gradually accepted the Moore family, particularly after Elijah's successful cattle breeding program brought new prosperity to the region. Even Mrs. Prescott eventually thawed, especially when Josephine organized a successful fundraising bazaar for the new schoolhouse. On the 10th anniversary of that fateful night, Elijah surprised Josephine by taking her to the spot where he had proposed building a proper home for their family. In place of the original cabin, which had been expanded several times to accommodate their growing household, stood a beautiful 2-story house with a wide, welcoming porch that wrapped around 3 sides. "Elijah," Josephine gasped, taking in the gleaming windows and freshly painted clapboards. "When did you—" "I've had crews working while you visited your sister in Denver," he explained, his eyes crinkling with pleasure at her reaction. The children helped keep the secret. Tears filled Josephine's eyes as she turned to embrace him. "It's beautiful. Perfect." "Not quite perfect yet," he said, taking her hand. "It needs you inside to make it a home." That evening, as they sat on their new porch watching their 4 children play in the yard, Elijah turned to Josephine with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened the door that night?" he asked quietly. "If I had found Emma after you'd gone?" Josephine considered the question, her hand automatically reaching for the silver locket she still wore daily. "I'd like to believe I would have found the courage to come back for her sooner rather than later," she said honestly. "But I'm grateful every day that you did open that door." "So am I," Elijah murmured, squeezing her hand. "It was the best decision I ever made saying both stay." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From desperate governess to beloved wife and mother, from shame to pride, from isolation to being surrounded by love, all because a kind-hearted cowboy had opened his door and his heart when she needed it most. "Both stay," she echoed softly, resting her head against her husband's shoulder as their children's laughter filled the twilight. The 2 most beautiful words in the English language. Elijah smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "And the truest promise I ever made." Together, they watched the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky, surrounded by the family they had built from that first leap of faith on a cold winter's night, when desperation led to destiny, and 2 simple words changed everything.